My name is Janine Guillermino, and I'm the Vice President of Mission Delivery at Living Beyond Breast Cancer. And I'm so pleased to serve as your moderator today with this amazing panel of people, all of whom I've had the opportunity to work with through some of Living Beyond Breast Cancer's leadership volunteer program. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for being with us today. So just really quickly before we jump in, for our panel today, we're going to be talking about different parts of the experience of living with metastatic breast cancer from the time of diagnosis and throughout your treatment, and learning a lot from the resilient members of our panel about the ways that they have faced this experience and what they've learned over time. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll try and keep my eye on that, and we'll try and answer your questions throughout the session. And we're looking forward to a great conversation. So I'm going to just jump in and start with a question about how you initially coped with your diagnosis. And I think that I'm going to start with Joy and ask you, Joy, how did you initially cope with your diagnosis with metastatic breast cancer?
I'll say I was initially just really frustrated because I had had a reoccurrence before that had been found from a scan. And I was always on my annual scans. And I had a persistent cough that was misdiagnosed as bronchitis. And I had had a scan a few months before. So I wasn't thinking of it being breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer. So I was kind of frustrated that it wasn't caught from a scan, but not just that, I was a little disappointed with myself for not recognizing it and kind of bringing it to my oncologist a little bit sooner, because I was on a kind of a 6-month cycle for seeing my oncologist. But I do, so I think it was frustration for me initially. And then after I accepted it, I had the kind of the same early stage attitude that how do I beat it? You know, I looked at it more as an early stage diagnosis, and I just didn't realize it was going to be more of a roller coaster of different lines of treatment, at least for me. So it was just a little frustrating initially.
Thank you for sharing that, Joy. And I'm wondering from other members of our panel who also had a recurrence of an early stage diagnosis, whether you share some of those sorts of experiences of not really fully absorbing what it meant to have a metastatic diagnosis.
I can address that. I mean, I agree with Joy. I was dumbfounded. I knew I could recur. I knew it could become metastatic, and but I just lived my life. I was teaching and active, and my daughter just gotten married, and things were just rolling along in my life. Was teacher of the year in my building, and then all of a sudden, boom. Yeah, it was, and I was not symptomatic, so I was caught on a routine chest X-ray that was ordered by my PCP. So it was shocked and then very frustrated. Why did this happen to me? It already happened one time, and I think I was like you, Joy. I was gonna, oh yeah, okay, let's roll up our sleeves. We're gonna make this go away.
Right.
And I didn't know that I was in a marathon. I thought I was in another sprint.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Lori. And as the two of you were talking, we got our first question from someone who's very recently diagnosed and who's saying she's really having difficulty planning more than a month at a time, that she feels paralyzed when thinking about the future. Leslie, as someone who's been living with metastatic disease for 6 years, I think, how long did it take you to sort of be able to think a little bit longer term? How did you begin to start thinking a little bit longer?
Yeah, so I'm actually going on year 9 of living with metastatic disease. So
thank you for that correction.
Yeah, because years for us, it matters. But for me, and I think that everyone is different. When I was diagnosed, I was basically diagnosed de novo. And I was devastated because I wanted to roll up my sleeves and say, okay, yeah, I'll give you guys, 8 months, 1 year, and then I'll go back to life as it was. But that was not the case. And so I, would say that it took me a good year to really settle into the realization and the acceptance that I'm going to be in treatment for the rest of my life. And it helped when my oncologist was really upfront and said, well, you are 99.999% incurable. And that just kind of really, even though I didn't want to really hear that, it put the perspective into what my reality was going to be. And, there are times that it's hard for me to look ahead. Am I going to have grandchildren? I don't know. But I know that for me, I'm here today. And I know that for tomorrow, I'm going to be here tomorrow. So sometimes all we can do is plan for the next 24 hours instead of like the next year. And that's okay. There'll be times when you feel like you can plan a vacation for the next month or a road trip or something that you've been wanting to do. And then there's times when you just can't. So it's really one of those personal things.
I really like, Leslie, that you talked about these little steps and thinking about little pieces of time to be able to move yourself forward. And you also said something else really interesting that I want to ask the panel about, which is the way that your doctor explained to you what you were facing and what it meant. And I'd like to bring you into the conversation, Amanda, in terms of things that your healthcare providers might have explained to you when you were diagnosed, you had a recurrent breast cancer, and how did they help you to understand what those next steps were?
Honestly, I had to go through a couple oncologists to kind of find the right fit. I was diagnosed stage 2 breast cancer back in 2014. Just had my child number 3, thought it was a clogged milk duct, different things like that. I know that's a commonality that in the groups earlier we were discussing. So it didn't really put a lot of full thought process into it. And yeah, then it came and I found an amazing oncologist. She was very sweet, very kind, very empathetic, but she always talked about quality of life. And we all want a good quality of life, but I mean, damn it, I'm not 40 yet. I want quantity of life. So it was one of those where it was like, okay, I respect you, but you know what? I think that I need to go elsewhere. And so, so my oncologist right now, we have a good working relationship. She tells me things I don't want to hear, but I definitely need to hear. So it's important to find that group of doctors that, one, you feel comfortable with, but two, they're going to be advocates right alongside you.
Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add in terms of their relationship with their oncologist and how that person or your team may have prepared you for what you are facing emotionally as a person living with metastatic disease?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think I didn't really hear my oncologist until my first line of treatment didn't work. And so it was at that point that I realized, hey, this is not like the early stage, but they were there, but they told me these things, but I wasn't mentally, I knew them, but I wasn't internalizing them. So I think that they helped. But one of the things that Amanda said that definitely resonates with me is you need to have the right team. You have to have the right team to, number one, who can help you kind of emotionally digest it, but also tell you straight, hey, this is what this is. This is how you're going to have to, this is what to expect. And it's, it's not necessarily an easy journey, but you need that balance of, of telling you how it is and really kind of sympathizing with you as well.
Thank you. And I know all of you have been living for different periods of time, different lengths of time. So Leslie, you've been living for 9 years, which I think is the longest term person that we have on this panel. I am wondering how your coping has changed over time from that first point of shock and acceptance to being able to move into the next pieces of your life. Lori, would you like to address that question?
Well, probably the best thing I did for myself was to find a good therapist. And I've been through a couple. No, I didn't run them off, but one retired and one I kind of outgrew. I have a really wonderful one now. But you need a place to take your feelings. And I think we can all say that you can't, there's just so much your family can take, and there's so much your friends can understand. And you need a place to take this, and you need some professional coping skills that you may not have. So that was probably the best thing I did for myself. And I think that over time, with their help, I have become a really good expert at what Leslie said, saying, well, I'm alive today, and this is what I'm doing today, and I know I'm going to be here tomorrow, and I can think about tomorrow. Now, that's not to say that I don't, okay, so next week I know that, I've got an oncologist appointment, that I just plan for day to day to day. But I'm very good at living in the present. When I was initially diagnosed in 2015, I was terrible at it. And all I could think about was all the things I was going to miss. And I don't dwell on that anymore. I am in the present most days.
Well, I hope, Lori, that you and others would give yourself grace for this really shocking news that you hear and that really changes your life. And so maybe you weren't as terrible at it as you think you may have been. But it kind of, one of the questions that came in as you were talking is, one person was asking, what is the number one thing that you did to educate yourself about metastatic breast cancer to kind of move yourself to this next point? And I'm wondering if someone would like to address that question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, so I think the best advice that I got when I was first diagnosed with metastatic disease was, do not go and Google your diagnosis, because you will have yourself dead in 2 weeks. And it's really hard. That's not to say that I didn't do it, but hearing that and then finding places like Living Beyond Breast Cancer, which was really my first organization that I went to really learn about this diagnosis that I was given. And it was through a support group that used to come through the email. Remember those way back when, in like 2012? But I had met I call her my mentor, Jill Cohen, and she has since passed away. But she was really pivotal in helping me to navigate through where to go for my education. And she had already been living with MBC for 7 years. And so it's finding these places like we're at right now and hearing from other people, and that really have made a difference.
Amanda, was there something that you wanted to share there? I think we might be frozen, but I'll come back to you when you're back with us. Something that I was thinking about, Leslie, as you were talking, obviously we're going through a pandemic, and some of the types of coping skills that you might have used, going to support groups, going out with friends, being with other people, might not have been available to you for the past year. And I'm wondering how COVID-19 and the pandemic has affected the way that you have coped as a person living with metastatic breast cancer. Joy, would you like to comment on that?
So COVID actually for me was a little bit of a blessing, because I had a progression at the beginning of COVID, because it allowed me to kind of focus on my treatment. And still continue to be able to work from home. So, but on the flip side, emotionally, like everyone else, it was really isolating from my friends and family, and be able to get help, during my treatments. Like, typically when you're going through different treatments, people are ready and willing to kind of come by, drop by, cook for you, help you clean. And those types of support weren't there for me going through my treatment. So that was a little bit harder for me, but overall, it gave me a little bit more life flexibility when it came to kind of my treatments and working. But on the emotional and kind of connection side, that's where, I had to really heavily rely on my husband, to do a lot of those things that typically I would ask my friends and family for as well.
Leslie, did you have, oh, I'm sorry.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Lori.
I think the parallel with COVID is perfect. I think that the isolation that everyone feels is certainly something that we've, lived with for a long time. I know that I would say, social media, I know social media gets a bad rap, but there's so many good things about social media. And I had established relationships with people on social media that have that have metastatic breast cancer like we do. And to be able to converse with them and to connect with them throughout this past year has been invaluable.
Thank you for sharing that, Lori. So Joy, you had started to actually talk a little bit about a progression that you experienced and what that was like. And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about how you dealt with that first progression, what that feeling was like, and how you made your initial decisions about treatment.
So
Leslie, go ahead.
So I actually had a couple progressions.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first, after the first one kind of failed and then the next one did fantastically, I was just like, great, this is a miracle. It was a PARP inhibitor, it was a miracle pill and things of that nature. And it worked so well for me. And so when I, for like almost a year, and then when the next progression I was just kind of dumbfounded. I was like, this thing was working so well, but it was working well for some things, but then I had a progression somewhere else. And so I was a little frustrated, but I was expecting it because I had now prepared myself for these different, these changes. But what I think that helped me is that all my treatment kind of decisions were made with my doctor. Because, since being diagnosed with NPC, I've been spending a lot of time like just researching and, different types of treatments that, align to my diagnosis. And attending conferences like this one and other conferences and just, being prepared to talk to my doctor once a progression, came up. So it was our conversation where, she brought out charts and things. This is what this medication is going to do. This is what the evidence showed. So she actually spoke to me in a more, technical way because I was prepared to receive the information in that manner as well, because I had been listening to different platforms and different, and talking to different support groups and getting that information for her. For myself. And so it made, me feel more comfortable for us to kind of work through, my next steps in my treatment and my progression, and, luckily I'm doing well right now. And it's just, and also spending time understanding like my labs and asking more questions about, how do they make clinical decisions, on even my supportive medications that are kind of going on with my, the main drug. So it's just, kind of educating myself, but also asking, a lot of the women who, like Leslie or Lori, everybody has been through different journeys with different drugs. And so getting, that knowledge as well is just, it's just invaluable, just getting the clinical information and just being a partner with your doctor. So they don't like just push something on you without you kind of, being able to participate. So.
Thanks for addressing that, Joy. And actually one of our attendees is asking, and so I'd love to hear from others in the group as well, about how active you are alongside your doctors in making your treatment decisions. For example, if you have to make a decision between one medicine and another, how active and what kind of conversations do you have with your physician to make that decision?
I decide my treatment. point blank.
Can you
I
tell
mean-
us a little more about that, Leslie? How do you decide your treatment? What are the sorts of things that you're thinking about when you're making that decision?
Yeah, so I think that my self-advocacy came along because of how I was treated during my first year with having MBC, and the doctors really wanting me to go this one way, but yet I ended up in the hospital for almost a month. I was septic, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, none of this makes sense, because why am I here in the hospital? It's not the cancer right now. It's my body not liking this particular treatment. And then, you know, like Joy, I decided to go get a second opinion, and everything changed for me then. And that's when I really started speaking up, and I started researching everything, and I started asking questions. And fortunately, I ended up with a second team that was amazing, that would spend as long as I wanted when I was visiting with them. But I just that's when I stepped into advocacy. That's when I just started really educating myself in my disease, and working with different pharmaceutical companies. And so now it's, I moved to a small town in Oregon. I came from Southern California. And so now I have this new oncologist, and, we're talking about because I did have a progression in 2018, and what was next. And I said, okay, well, these are the choices. These are my only choices that I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about them together. And so we did, and she listened to me, which I was thankful about, because quality of life is very important to me. So there were certain things that, okay, but if I can do without this, can I just be on this? So it was a lot of negotiating back and forth until I felt comfortable. And so the treatments that I have been on since 2013 is because they were my choice. And so whatever happens in my choice, it's because I made the decision. So there's no one else to say, okay, well, maybe we didn't do this right. I made that choice. And to the treatment that I'm on today. And when I do progress, I've already decided what my next treatment plan is going to be, if nothing changes as far as my subtype. So
thanks for sharing that, Leslie. And I want to just quickly acknowledge Amanda is with us. You can't see her, but she is with us, and she's going to contribute. And I'm going to turn and ask her a question to just sort of feed off of what Leslie was just talking about. At every step of the treatment process, there's always the weighing of the side effects that you might encounter with treatment, and the effectiveness of the treatment. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, Amanda, about some of the side effects that have impacted your life and how you've adapted or managed those over time. I think we may have a little bit of a delay with Amanda. So I'm wondering if someone else would like to address that question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I gotta love technology, right?
Nope, that's
At least
okay.
this page looks a little bit less shiny on my face, so we can look at this.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with my audio. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can hear you clear as a bell.
So just reflect just a little bit back. Okay, I could write an entire book just about side effects. I have been on so many lines of treatment. It has been crazy. It's hard, especially working full time, having 3 kiddos, taking them to different activities. It's definitely something that is not necessarily the most convenient thing, but just learning silly things such as like, if you need to make sure that the bathroom's close by, making sure that you have your Tums close by, just silly different things like that. I know, just kind of figuring out what works for you when it works for you, and just kind of know your body. That's just kind of number one right there. You got to know your body.
Thanks for that, Amanda. I'm wondering, Lori, if you'd like to comment on that as well.
Yeah, I've been on 5 lines of treatment. So I've had a variety of different side effects, and I can also think about the early stage side effects. I'm not a big nausea person, so I've been lucky that way, but I understand Amanda's reference to knowing where the bathroom is, because and also sometimes making choices, well, you know what, I can't do that because I don't know where a reliable bathroom will be. I had, like Joy, had progression at the beginning of COVID. And so I switched to a drug that, I didn't have to worry about where the bathroom was because I was at home a lot. So, a plus of COVID. But anyway, the way I have managed my side effects is to seek out some care from my primary care. There's no palliative care where I live, but my primary care physician has helped me a great deal with some issues. I'm a big believer in acupuncture, and I have used that for a variety of things. It's helped me with neuropathy, and it's helped me with headaches, and it's helped me with hand-foot syndrome that I've got from Xylota.
Thanks, Lori. Joy, I think you wanted to respond to that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo what Amanda said, is that you really need to kind of learn your body, because, one of the biggest side effects that I have had is just fatigue. And, from any of the treatments that I've had a lot of fatigue, and you hit this fatigue wall and you just like fall. Well, at least I do. I just like literally have to stop and not necessarily just go to sleep, but just like rest. And, but just learning my body, when I need to take a nap, what times a day I have the most energy, what times a day my brain works the best and is most efficient, especially since I worked full time. I need to make sure that the meetings that I have are kind of around those things, around my, or the critical ones are around the times that, I have the most energy and my brain works the most efficient. And so I just have to like learn your body, just learn. But every time you change a treatment, you have to relearn it. Like every line of treatment, you have to like start over and learn your body again on that treatment. So it's not always the same. So you just have to be flexible and really be patient with yourself, as for all of your different side effects. So especially as you're changing treatment lines.
Thanks for sharing that, Joy. And I thought it was really interesting how you talked about with each treatment change, it's relearning, it's retalking. And we have a number of questions from participants that are focusing on communication, because a lot of times the people around you may not understand all these changes, all the impacts on your life. And we've been talking about that in some of the other sessions. So this one question, I'm going to read it word for word, is what advice can you give for sharing your diagnosis with friends and family? I feel like I have failed my initial breast cancer treatment. Who would like to address that question?
I'll try. Well, I'll just kind of try, from my perspective. So I was diagnosed 13 years ago. So I had, and I had a first early stage. So everybody, rah, support you through that first round. Then I had a recurrence, and then, you beat it, and then I beat it again. So, probably like, 10 years later. And so it was when I was diagnosed metastatic, it was like the third time I'm telling my friends and family, and they're like, well, you beat it the first 2 times, you're going to beat it again. And so they really didn't understand the difference between, this beating this early stage, because majority of the world looks at early stage, and what it meant to be metastatic. That yes, you are going to fight this disease, but it's a disease that you will be fighting for the rest of your life. And they want to be as supportive as possible. And so, they want to rah you through, how many more chemo treatments do you have? How many more radiation treatments do you have? They want to count those things down so they can support you through that. So I've had to re-educate, my family over and over again and just saying, hey, it's not like it was before. This is different. I am going to be dealing with this like a chronic disease, just like you guys deal with, diabetes or some type of heart disease or anything like that. I am going to have to figure out, what treatments are going to make this cancer go away, or at least, not attack me so that I can continue to live my life. And so it's just a re-education over and over again. And then to be fair, they have now, like my close friends and stuff, they get it, but they can't necessarily empathize with you, but they get and hear what you're saying. And so that's where you also have to reach out to your support system of NBCers, because they are the ones who get it. Like people with NBC are the ones who really, get what you're going through. And so you really have to leverage both your family as well as your NBC network of, and community to help you kind of get through. And they have also lots of advice too. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Thanks, Joy. I think that's really helpful. I wonder if others have anything else they'd like to add or advise to this person.
I was never early stage, so
it's a different experience and a different feeling.
Right. I guess I don't know, how I would feel. Yeah, I just know.
I'm sorry, Leslie.
No, go ahead, Lori.
I was going to say, I think, and this is not a criticism of my friends and family, I think they've got some cancer fatigue. There's a lot of rah-rah, like Joy, we're going to beat this thing, and we beat it, and then it comes back, and, and you try to, and I was one of these, I'm going to send a group email, I'm going to tell everybody how I'm doing, and every time I had a scan and if I had a progression, and all that just sort of petered away, because I don't think it wasn't that people didn't care. I really don't believe that. I think it's just that it was just too much. It was not in there. It was not something they could think about. So now I really kind of I have a few very close friends that understand. I mean, they don't understand because they don't have metastatic breast cancer, but they understand the progression and the change of treatments, and they know that I'm going to be on treatment until I'm not. And that's it. And that's who I tell my immediate family, my brothers. Other than that, I know, other than that, I think that I'm just saving them from the cancer fatigue. It's just after almost 6 years, I think somebody's thinking like, well, jeepers, you hadn't died already? I mean, you've been talking about this for 6 years. So I keep it to myself.
But thank you for that honesty, Lori. Joy, what were you going to add?
I just want to follow up with that, but that's very true about the cancer fatigue. But one of the things that I've done now too is because, people don't want to be sad when they call you every time and you're giving them an update. You haven't talked to them in 2 months. Oh, tell me what's going on. Oh, I got this cancer. And so I actually, sorry, I'm still here, still battling cancer. And so instead, I kind of I kind of leave it at the end. I kind of, I start off my conversations with my friends and family, especially if I'm not talking to them on a regular basis, on, about what's going on with their lives. What are the things that are going on in my life that are not, by treatment related or anything like that. So they're not dreading calling me and learning about, hey, what the latest thing that's going on with your treatment. Oh, you're sick, you're this and that and the other. I want to have an upbeat conversation with you. And I want you to continue to call me and support me, even through things that are not cancer. I am not cancer, so I had to change how I spoke to people and how I have conversations with people, so I didn't depress them. I don't want them to feel burdened by me and my experience, and I want them to appreciate why we're friends and why we're family now, and both outside of cancer. So that's kind of the things that I've tried to, at least change and learn.
Thanks for sharing that, Joy. And I would also say here that this is a place where organizations like Living Beyond Breast Cancer and many of our colleagues who are here can be an ally to you, because we can be the bad guys. We can explain what it is on our websites that you are coping with. And maybe we can be the the bad ones, who explain that you're in ongoing treatment and this is something that you are facing, and we can do a better job of educating the public about what metastatic breast cancer is. So we've been talking a lot about communication with adults, but for many of you have children of different ages, young children, older children. And I wanted to give Amanda an opportunity to talk just for a minute about how she kind of copes with talking with her kids about ongoing treatment, because they're in sort of a really different emotional place to be able to process ongoing cancer therapy. Amanda, would you like to share with us? So unfortunately, I think we're still having some technical problems with Amanda, but I'm wondering if someone else on the panel would like to speak to that, regardless of your children's ages. If you could just explain how old your children are, whether they're young children or adult children.
So I'll talk about my kids. My kids are older. So my daughter was a senior in high school, and then my two sons were both young adults, and I think I still grieve that because I miss my daughter's entire senior year of high school, which is really a bummer. And then she went to college, so there's a lot of grieving that goes in. But each of my kids are very different. So my oldest, who is now 33, would rather hide under the covers in the bed and not want to think about mom having cancer. Whereas my daughter, if I say things to her, and she's like 26 now, and if I say, I need to talk to you, she'll immediately start crying because she'll think it's cancer related. And then I have my middle boy who is like constantly, I love you, mom, and I'm here for you. And how are you feeling? So it's knowing your kids' personalities and then being able to share with them, as parents and as they're growing up, we get to know these little nuances about our children. And the best thing that we can do is to help them and to communicate to them in a way where they can receive it that doesn't seem so threatening or, non-encouraging. So that's my experience with my children.
Thank you, Leslie. Lori, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Mine, when I was diagnosed early stage, mine daughter, I had a daughter in college and one that was out working. I mean, so my kids were older, but I would amplify what Leslie said about each child, because I mean they're always your children, being different. Both of them have reacted differently to the metastatic diagnosis, and both of them support me differently as I go day to day. And honestly, because they're both adults, I rely on them differently for different types of support. I would say that back to what Joy was saying about, we don't talk a lot about it because I don't want that to be, that's just a piece of me. That's not all of me. And it seems like an invader in our family and an invader in the relationship. And I don't want that to be. We don't talk about it a lot. If it needs to be talked about, we discuss it after kind of I've sorted through everything and made a decision, and then we talk about it. But it's, they're people too, and we're a family, and that's the way we work.
Thanks for that, Lori. And sort of as a follow-up to that, I'm just looking over some of the questions coming through. A couple of you have talked about getting emotional support from an outside person, like from social media groups or from a counselor or a therapist. And so I have a couple questions about that. The first is whether there are particular metastatic groups that you would recommend that people engage in that are safe places for them to get emotional support.
This is Amanda. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yay, technology. Woohoo. Hi, yay. Well, I was first going to say, is there really any other organization other than LVBC? I mean, pretty cream of the crop, that's for sure. But definitely there's other ones as well. I know Project Life is a new one that's talking about survivorship. And there's a lot of different things on Facebook too, especially the young women's group that you guys have. It is amazing. And I know that served as a huge sounding board for me when I was initially diagnosed.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and we really appreciate the support. There are a variety of organizations, many of them who are here at the conference this weekend and who you can visit at the exhibits, and that have some really amazing programming for people with metastatic breast cancer. So I encourage you to check them out. Amanda, since we have you back, I wanted to ask you that question about communicating with children, because I think we had lost you at the time, to just give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. And I know you shared some of that earlier at the parenting session, but can you just talk a little bit about how much you share with your kids and the way that you may do that differently based on their ages or their situations?
Absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head right there. It definitely has to be age appropriate. Making sure that you're not utilizing terminology that they don't understand. It's definitely important to, we're a family, we're a team unit. Nobody wants to be on the bench watching the rest of the players play the game. So just really giving them a role and letting them know that we're here to communicate with them. That's the most important thing. How are they going to learn? How are they going to cope? How are they going to find their outlets? If they're not heard, their voices are just as important. So I know with us, we do have different family meetings and such like that where we talk. Some of the girls love to talk about their feelings. Our son doesn't really necessarily want to talk about his feelings, which is totally fine. So we have different avenues where we've provided each one of the kiddos with their own journal. So if they don't feel comfortable talking to us, or if there's a word that we use that they don't understand, writing it down, making it so that way we have that ongoing communication back and forth. Just it's important, and definitely utilizing again the language and asking them questions. A lot of times my kiddos will ask like, well, why does this have to happen? And, of course I want to tell them because it sucks and, all that kind of thing. But, it's important to put the ball back in their court. Well, that's really interesting. Why did you ask me that? Where did you hear that from? So that way we're speaking at all angles because, making sure that they feel safe and they feel comfortable. That's important. We're grooming the littles right now. So that's kind of a couple things that we do.
Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. And I think some of those suggestions work for adults as well. So maybe we'll pivot back because believe it or not, we only have about 15 more minutes together. And I really want to be able to pick the brains of our panelists on some ideas around self-care. And I think I'm going to start with Leslie because I think Amanda mentioned earlier about Project Life, which is a project that Leslie has been working on. So Leslie, can you talk a little bit about, just from your perspective, what self-care looks like for you?
Sure. So self-care for me, actually, it all began, and I tell the story of taking my 1-year life sabbatical after being diagnosed, was I really had to learn about myself again. I had to learn about who I was without the title of wife and mom and, taxi driver to all these different sporting events, and really get to know like who I was, as almost like bringing out the little girl again. What brings me life? What brings me passion? And so for me, self-care has become the outdoors. And if I don't get a nature fix, then Leslie is just no good. But, I think everyone is different. And for some people, self-care is bubble baths and maybe going to get a massage, or it's just, having a barbecue with your loved ones. So I think that, being able to really just kind of be curious about yourself and what you like and what you're interested in, and then giving yourself permission to do it, and not thinking about all the other things that are going on, but really, like what Lori says, is being present. So you decide to go on a walk, be present with that walk, and, you know, look at the flowers and the neighbors doing their yards, or, you know, whatever it is. So yeah, that is, you know, how I came about what my self-care looks about. And every day is different, you know.
Thanks for sharing that, Leslie. Lori, how about you? What does self-care look like for you in your life?
I am an exerciser. I am a doer. I make sure that every day I do something physical. It helps me I feel better mentally. I feel better physically. I am, I know that I've been able to deal with some difficult treatments because I'm in, except for the cancer, in pretty good physical condition, especially for my age. When I don't have, you know, if it rains, I'm a big walker. I play tennis. I've played tennis for, I hate to say 30 years, with the pretty much the same group of women. We're all very good friends. It's a way to just go out and have a good time and enjoy ourselves. And there's no cancer talk, and there's no any kind of talk. It's just doing something that we all love to do. So I've since COVID has occurred in the pandemic, I've done a lot of virtual exercising, which is not nearly as much fun as going to a studio or going to a gym, because I like people and I want to be around people, but I've kept it up because I know it's good for me. So self-care for me is making sure that I don't let anything get in the way of getting exercise. And if I can safely do it with people, I choose that.
Joy, did you have something you wanted to add there?
No, I mean, those are excellent. I feel like I need to do more self-care listening to Lori and Leslie there. So, but one thing that I will add, I feed off energy of other people. And so so those are the things that I missed with COVID and everything. But what I've been able to do is, just virtually start feeding off my, a lot of my friends. We kind of have like, just meetups as well. And then we've been able to now connect outside and, as well, and just, and do that. But one thing that I will have to say that is my number one self-care now is sleep. I need so much more sleep than I needed before. And so a normal person needs 8, I need at least 10. So, or, and even not, if it's not the whole 10 at one time, I need it throughout the day. I need to get 10 hours of sleep somehow. So so that would be one thing that that I kind of force myself to do now, because I know my body feels the best when I'm well rested.
Thanks, Joy. And one question that occurred to me, because there's a question in the chat, someone was asking about how you decide about working versus taking disability. And I know some of you are, you continue to be employed right now. And I'm wondering whether anyone working as part of your self-care.
It's mine.
Can you talk a little about that, Joy?
Yeah, I honestly, if I did not work, I'm not quite sure. I may lose myself. And I've worked, like I said, this journey has been a very long journey for me, for like 13 years. And, but I've always worked. I never really took any time off. I'm not saying that that was always the best, but it was my sanity from it was my sanity, because it has nothing to do with cancer, nothing about treatment, not me talking about cancer with someone, even my advocacy. I love doing advocacy, but it's still talking about cancer and someone else's experience with cancer. Whereas work, I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it at all. So it creates a little silo, a bubble for me that is, cancer free. It's a cancer free, and I can still feel productive in what I'm doing every day, but I also have, understand my limitations as well. So, but I definitely continue to work, and I think as long as I can, at some point, some days are really hard. Like you really have to, it's day by day. So some days are really hard. And I actually understand, why people decide not to work, right? And just really focus on their treatment and their self-care. I completely understand. So, but for me, it is definitely a distraction, or I don't want to call it self-care, because really work, it shouldn't be self-care, but it's kind of like that.
I
Thanks
agree
for
with
sharing.
Joy as well.
Mhm.
100%. I'm still working full time as well. It's challenging, especially with what Joy contended to with needing more sleep. That's definitely important. But with my job as a speech language pathologist, it's really empowering. It's kind of in a sense, giving the voice to people that need to have a voice, and just it's helping others. And I really feel that with that niche and that outlet, it's fulfilling, and it definitely takes the mind off of like, oh, okay, that's right, I do have cancer. Okay. So, you feel it as soon as you go home and you want to sit down and, go to bed. But, it's definitely fulfilling and important.
And I will actually just add on, I work from home. So now that, especially with my new treatments, so that has been like I said, with COVID and things like that, I used to travel all the time. I wouldn't be able to do that now. So that is another flexibility that I have that everyone else does not necessarily have that opportunity to do.
Thanks for sharing that, Joy. And I know there's a lot of conversation in the chat about making that choice about filing for SSDI versus working. And I would encourage you to go to lbbc.org for more information, and to some of our colleague organizations such as Triage Cancer that will have a lot of information about the specifics around issues that you might want to think about when you're making that decision. So unfortunately, we only have a few more minutes, and I'm going to give our closing question and give each of our panelists an opportunity to answer it. So for our closing question today, I want to ask how being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer has changed your perspective or your life's focus. And I'm going to start with Amanda.
Oh boy. Let's see here. How has it changed my life focus? I grew up in a family where if you sat down, it meant you were lazy. You have to go, go, go. Rest is not for the weary, or however that little tale goes. So with having metastatic cancer, my body is basically telling me, okay, you need to chill, you need to sit down, you need to rejuvenate. So just taking time for that self-care, as we were just talking about, and definitely making sure that, the smaller things, okay, this is not that big of a deal. The perspective has definitely changed hugely. And I'm actually, as weird and morbidly as it sounds, I'm very happy that I've had the experience to be able to look through a different lens.
Thanks, Amanda. Lori?
I would say I was always a big planner. I had, calendar full of stuff, marking things off, just, obsessively about all of that. And it has definitely forced me to slow down and think about what I'm doing today and who I'm with today, and enjoy my time with them today, and enjoy my time working in the yard, enjoy my time playing tennis, whatever it is that I'm doing. And I retired after my diagnosis. It made me be grateful and aware of my daily life.
Thank you so much, Lori. Joy?
I would say that it's caused me to first kind of obviously relook at my career priorities, and then really kind of focus on prioritizing my family, myself, and my community when it comes to like advocacy, not just because that's what's most important. And I even actually started this thing where like every day, like no pun intended, that, I'm looking for something that brings me joy. But one of the things that, that I like to do is like, who can I call or bless today so that like I don't know, that makes me feel good. And it makes other people feel good when they aren't expecting you to call them or bless them. And with COVID and just not being able to talk to a lot of people for a while, it just made me, in my last year I also lost my parents. And so it just made me realize I just need to connect with people more. And, I want to leave an impression on them, and I want to cherish the impressions that they can give me. And so I can just, you take those nuggets with you. And at the end of the day, no one's going to ask on my, my deathbed, how many hours did she work in the, in the office? So it's just reprioritizing what life is. And unfortunately, I've had, some from deaths in my family over the last year that has also, kind of forced me to reanalyze and rethink, how I approach life. So.
Thank you, Joy. Leslie?
Yeah, so for me, I guess the word that comes up for me is curate. So I've become the master curator of my life. I will decide each and everything that I bring into my life, and have no problem saying no to things that do not bring me joy. And before cancer, I was an advocate. I ran my own nonprofit. I've always been an advocate. So it just made sense for me to transfer my advocacy from before cancer into the cancer world. And that's all I do now is I advocate for this community. I love it. I'm passionate about it. And it's basically what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And thanks to all of our panelists for sharing your experiences with everyone here today. Thank you all for being with us. I hope that now that our day is concluding, everyone will get a chance wherever you are across the country or around the world to step outside and breathe the fresh air. And we hope that you'll all join us tomorrow morning for the yoga class, which starts at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and will join us for another day of connection and information. So thanks again to all of you for joining us today. And thanks for being on our panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.